but it's going to get a little bit more complicated. You're going to have to generalize the basic concept. So imagine that Clemence wants to buy an apple, Agnès wants to buy an orange, maybe, and Israel wants to buy only the two together because he's going to make some crazy apple-orange pie or something like that, right? But he doesn't want either of them individually, right? Now, what would he have to pay in order to win the auction? Well, imagine that Clemence bids $5 for the apple, Agnès bids $3 for the orange, and Israel bids $9 for the pair of the two objects, right? Well, he should have to pay $8 because that's the total amount of value he's taking away as a result of his bid. But now imagine that instead, Agnès bids $5 and so beats Israel's bid. Then what happens is that she should have to pay she should have to pay $4, right? Because that's the difference between what he was willing to pay and what Clemence is willing to pay for what remains if she gets her apple. You see what I mean? Because that's the total amount of net value subtracted. So once you get to these more complicated situations, the payments are a little bit more sophisticated. And in fact, that's exactly what Paul Milgram was talking about yesterday, is in these spectrum situations, you have these very complicated interference patterns where like one person can broadcast their thing and this other person can broadcast, or this third person could with this other fourth person, but this pair couldn't interact together because they would interfere with each other. And so you have to, there's sort of this complicated process to determine what is the payment that someone has to pay to be included. Another example that's sort of like this is things having to do with course selection. Sometimes you can have an auction like this where people have artificial currency and they bid for courses. There are many proposals to use a system like this, but it's pretty uncommon that it actually gets used in practice. Let me give you one sort of wild example of it. So imagine that we were trying to replace the system of eminent domain. You guys know what eminent domain is? The government comes in and like takes people's land away, right? But that could be inefficient. Someone could come in and just take people's land away, and it could be worth a lot more to the people to stay on their land than it's worth to the person who's coming to try to buy it, but they just have the coercive power of the government, they can just take it away. So imagine we wanted to make that more efficient. One thing you could do is have someone report, how much am I willing to pay to get all the land? And then have each person report how much they're willing to pay to stay on their land, right? Then if the person who bids for all the land wins, just like in the Clemence Agnès example with Israel, they have to pay the sum of all the amount that people are willing to pay to stay on their land. What if the land ends up not going to the person who's buying it, and one person says they valued their land enough to veto it? Well, if they just cause it to get vetoed, right? If maybe the person offered $1,000 for all the land, and there were like 10 people, and they each bid, $105, right? So in total, that would be $1,050, right? Then if you remove any one of those individual people, it's only, it's going to be, $910, right? And the difference between that and 1,000 is 90. So each one of them would have to pay $90 because that's how much more value would have been created had they said that their land wasn't worth anything, right? So if you wanted to replace eminent domain with this efficient system, you could do that, but then all these people would have to make payments if they end up staying in their houses, which is equal to how much value could have been created if they'd been willing to leave their house, right? And so that's an example of sort of a crazy type of an application of the agreed-upon gross mechanism. Anyway, that's it. Thanks, guys. You guys have a problem set due on Tuesday, right?
Yes.
Enjoy.